schedules for caregivers and remote work options, and whether the corporation has an anti-harassment policy in place. The survey received from each corporation must be signed by an officer of the corporation stating under penalty of perjury that the information provided in the survey is true, correct, and complete. Madam Chair and committee members, in short, what 267 does is it offers us an opportunity to walk our talk, not just as a legislature, but as a state. If we truly, truly, truly want to get a handle on the pandemics of racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, if we want to get a handle on all of those isms, I think that it's important for us to have some type of measurement so we know where we start. We can then identify a goal, and we can measure how long it takes us to get there. I remember I was one of the first women to be branched to a combat support arms in 1978 when I got my commission. And this was shortly after the WAC commission, or the WAC Corps, had been decommissioned. Many other men did not want us there, and we knew it. They always told us that this man's army is no place for women. They certainly didn't want a Black woman, of which I was the only one in my class. Throughout my military career, there were instances where I was discriminated against because I was either a woman or Black, and sometimes both. But Secretary of Defense Austin, a few weeks ago, has said all of that is going to change because the military will reflect the country, the diversity of this country, and he will not tolerate any sexual harassment. He will not tolerate any acts of white supremacy or things of that nature. And he is moving forward in a very aggressive way to make sure that the military reflects the community that they protect. This is a bill that is not punitive. It's a bill that provides an opportunity, especially for those corporations who are already doing the tenets of the bill, to brag about it. It's an opportunity for those who want to know how to do it. Remember I said we're going to talk about best practices, to learn how to do it. It is an opportunity for businesses in this state, together with the people of this state. It is an opportunity for the agencies of the state government, along with the taxpayers who pay their salaries, to cooperate to build a state that is full of diversity, equality, and equity. I'm joined this afternoon by former Senator Harris, Becky Harris, and by Jan Jones, Executive Residence in Blackfire Innovation Hub. And I will turn it over to former Senator Harris at this time.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel, Vice Chair Canizaro, members of the committee, and the committee manager. For the record, I am Becky Harris, and I am here to testify in support of Senate Bill 267 and walk you through a conceptual amendment that I worked through with Senator Spearman, as well as Ms. Jones, who will be testifying in just a minute. The ravages of COVID-19 and the pandemic that has occurred across the world have decimated the Nevada workforce. Indeed, a recent study finds that the workforce in the state of Nevada has been the hardest hit of any in the United States. From the work done by women of diversity in Nevada, we know that in Nevada, women are increasingly the primary breadwinners in their households. As the world continues to navigate its way through COVID-19, it is becoming increasingly clear that women are becoming disproportionately impacted. McKinsey's Women in the Workplace 2020 report concluded that women in particular have been negatively impacted. Women, especially women of color, are more likely to have been laid off or furloughed during the COVID-19 crisis, stalling their careers and jeopardizing their financial security. That the she-cession is real is documented in various news outlets. The New York Times has a particularly poignant article entitled "Why Some Women Call This Recession a She-Cession," about the difficulties women face as they attempt to balance employment, working from home, caregiving, and other responsibilities. Never has the need for resources for women and underrepresented populations been more significant as employers continue to downsize and entire industries have been shut down. Often considered hidden workers because they don't possess the qualities of an ideal candidate, Harvard Business Review has done some work with regard to women, immigrants, veterans, and seniors and how they find it difficult to transition into the workforce. A research team has also gone to the trouble of tabulating the cost of a lack of gender diversity and inclusion. They determined it will take 257 years to close the gap at the current rate. They further found that not doing so has cost the world $70 trillion since 1990. The report by economists at Bank of America, of B of A Securities, also notes that full gender equality globally can increase the world GDP by up to $28 trillion by 2025. Additionally, the loss of human capital wealth due to gender inequality alone is estimated at $160.2 trillion. Implementing the tools to assist those with diverse backgrounds to gain entry to the workforce, retain employment, and succeed will help reduce the need for social services and unemployment benefits from both state and federal governments. It will help provide housing and food security for families and provide the diversity needed to rebuild a stronger economy. Women have been making gains in the workforce, both in terms of representation as well as pay equity over the past few decades, but the McKinsey workplace study concluded if women remain on the sidelines and are not part of the workforce, there will be fewer women in leadership positions or on track to become leaders. All of the recent gains women have made will have been completely erased. It's interesting, and I appreciate the context that Senator Spearman offered about the genesis of this bill. As you may or may not recall, in 2017, there was a similar bill with regard to the necessity to index for gender equity. That bill was a pilot program that passed unanimously out of the Senate. The Assembly vote was probably more along partisan lines, but at least out of the Senate, it was recognized that there was value in capturing data about how women and others fare through the employment situation in the state of Nevada. Originally, that program was administered through the Secretary of State's website as a voluntary survey for Nevada's business entities, all of whom supported that bill as it was making its way through the legislature. And as a result, we've been able to capture important data about the nature of employment for women. We have also learned in the last 4 years that the Secretary of State's office is not the most effective location for the administration of this survey because the majority of data we have is about small business owners. And while that's been important, what we feel is really important is the ability to study how large employers in Nevada deal with diversity and inclusion. To that end, Senate Bill 267 is seeking to apply to public institutions and businesses with an amendment to 1,000 employees who employ 1,000 employees or more, who are most likely already capturing this data on underrepresented populations and diversity in the workplace. This is not meant to be a piece of gotcha legislation to punish Nevada employers. Rather, it is to celebrate the efforts made by Nevada's businesses as well as their position as employers so that they can be more diverse and inclusive. Senate Bill 267 is well suited to provide disaggregated rich data about both Nevada's workforce and Nevada's work environment. This data should enable the development of best practices that can be shared to improve work environments throughout Nevada, as well as serve as an attraction and a retention for top talent in Nevada as we continue to grow and diversify our economy. Chair Schiebel, with your indulgence, I would like to offer a proposed conceptual amendment that has been agreed to by Senator Spearman.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. In our conversations with stakeholders and with each other, we felt that it would be appropriate to offer this proposed conceptual amendment and make the following changes. First, expand the applicability of the bill so that in addition to corporations, the provisions of the bill would also apply to state governmental agencies, including without limitation, the Nevada system of higher education and all of its institutions, as well as local governmental agencies. Point number two, originally we were going to have corporations and local governments provide their completed reports to the Department of Taxation, and that the report prepared by the Department of Taxation would only include information regarding corporations and local government agencies. Three, we now want to require governmental agencies to provide their completed reports to the Division of Human Resource Management of the Department of Administration instead of Taxation. That's the government agency that's most naturally in communication with the state agencies and governments, and that would be a more natural fit. That division would be required to make available on its internet website the annual reports submitted by state government agencies with personally identifiable information redacted, and aggregate data relating to annual reports with personally identifiable information redacted. That division would also be required to compile annually the information contained in the reports submitted to the division, and then collate that into one report that would then be submitted to the governor and to the Director of Legislative Counsel Bureau. Item 4, we would delete the provisions of the bill that impose criminal penalties, including the penalty for perjury, and instead provide that a person who violates the provision of the bill would be subject to administrative fines that would be established by regulations adopted by the Department of Taxation, and that the department would be required to adopt a schedule of administrative fines where the amount of fines increases based on the number of violations. And finally, we would delete Section 6, subsection 3, Section 11, and Section 12 of the bill, and instead have that survey compiled by the Department of Taxation and provide that the department would develop the survey in consultation with the Legislative Commission.
All right, thank you. Senator Spearman, do you have other guests here to present with you?
Yes, ma'am. I have Ms. Jan Jones.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Senator. First, I'd like to compliment the Senator on putting forth this legislation and reminding that 2 years ago, working with Senator then Becky Harris, we passed a similar piece of legislation, although this current survey gives us much more rich data in trying to assess where we are in representation in the Nevada workforce. For the last 30 years, I've made my central mission and vision building diverse and inclusive workforce, both in state government and in corporate America, particularly Nevada. And I will tell you, although we've made some progress, we've made markedly little progress given the composition of a state, the representation of our state, the talent of our diverse populations in the state. And it's taught me two things. First, what's not measured won't matter. And second, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, then you've defined insanity. If we really are committed to changing how we evaluate representation in the state of Nevada, we need to be willing to compile data that helps us achieve that goal. One of my models that I've looked to for decades has been the Human Rights Committee, who put forth a survey that measured companies not in a way to penalize, but in a way to support, that represented policies, representation, elements that made LGBTQ members of the workforce respected in their companies. Today, companies, Caesars Entertainment being one of them, rush to achieve a 100% score because we're proud of what we've accomplished in building those inclusive workforce. I think where we've been the most successful in Nevada in building a diverse and inclusive workforce is the composition of the state legislature, which is now minority women. In Nevada, I congratulate the voters of Nevada for their foresight. I think if we look at this bill not as a way to penalize, but as a way to help, support, promote, I think it's absolutely imperative that state governments, local governments, county governments, and any taxpayer-funded entity, that this be mandatory. Those groups are supported by taxpayer money, and quite frankly, they should represent the taxpayers that are supporting them. So looking at how we build representational governments, I think should be a mandatory requirement. I know there is some concern on the part of the business community, and although I believe that 1,000 or above would be appropriate, if that was a roadblock, I think we should at least look at the Human Rights Committee and how they use their index to compile this information in a way that celebrated forward-looking companies and put those programs and policies in place in Nevada as well. Madam Schiebel, Vice Chairman Canizero, members of the committee, I appreciate your opportunity to allow us to speak today. I think this is such an important step for the state. And I've always believed that Nevada can be the leader. Quite frankly, it's very hard to fix California. No offense, Governor Newsom. But Nevada has always been the entrepreneurs. We've always been the visionaries that saw what could be done and found a way to do it. I don't see finding this information and using it both for companies who are looking to come to Nevada to talk about what a forward-thinking state we are and why they would want to bring their headquarters here. I think this could be a benefit not only for the state, but for the people who live, work, and support the governments in this state. So I thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I hope you will give this bill due consideration.
Thank you. Chair Scheibel, I just want a couple of comments before you open it up for questions. My sister and I and 14 other teenagers, high school teenagers, were among the first to integrate a high school in Alabama. And I don't need to tell you that that was tough. It was very tough, but we did it because the law required it. We went through so many abuses, both verbally and physically, but somebody had to be the first. Somebody had to be the first to pave the way. We also know that in 1954, when the ruling came down that separate is not equal, somebody had to be the first. Somebody had to be the first. I look at this bill as a point on the continuum for equity and equality. Equity in every way. We are the first female majority in the country, and this is the second session that has happened. First, we lead with respect to renewable energy. I don't know how many of you all remember when Jamie Redford came to Nevada and chronicled our efforts to make sure that we were making use of renewable energy. And unfortunately, Jamie passed away last year, but he chronicled that, and that is forever in history. Nevada leads. I know that this is going to be tough work. I have no illusions, tough work. But it will take courageous conversations about where we want to be in 10 years. But more importantly, what kind of state do we want to leave our children and our grandchildren? So these courageous conversations have to start somewhere, and this bill affords us an opportunity to do just that. As Ms. Jones says, this is not punitive. This is a way to make sure we are making the best use of all of our resources in the state, all of our resources. So thank you, Madam Chair, and we will stand for questions.
All right, thank you so much for your presentation. Looks like we already have a couple of members queued up to ask questions. I'll start with Senator Orenshaw.
Thank you very much, Chair Scheibel, and thank you, Senator Spearman, for sponsoring this legislation. And I think it's really fitting that on this bill, we have co-presenting with you, Senator Spearman, Mayor Jones, our first female mayor of the city of Las Vegas, and former Senator Harris, our first female chair of the Nevada Gaming Control Board. So some really tremendous firsts, and really laud your accomplishments. My question has to do with the proposed conceptual amendment, and it is the last paragraph that talks about the requirement that Department of Taxation consult with the Nevada Commission for Women and the Nevada Commission for Minority Affairs when developing the survey. Do you feel there's that kind of cooperation now, or do you think that if this passes, that they'll be able to work together in a way that will help get that information that we need?
And when you
Chair,
questions,
would you like me to take that?
Direct.
Okay. I believe that what we've done, we have some experience working with these commissions in the past, and we're grateful for their representation and their willingness to provide us with their perspective. But what this amendment would do would actually put it in the hands of the Department of Taxation and the Legislative Commission, so that you all, as more representative of the people and population in the state of Nevada, have an opportunity to come together and make sure that you're crafting a survey that captures the information that will be important and critical for us to be able to measure in terms of workforce development.
Thank you very much, Chair Harris. Thank you, Chair Scheibel.
Absolutely. We'll go next to Senator Pickard.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. It's interesting that we have talked about this as much as we have this session. And this bill reminded me a lot of some research I did prior to the last bill. Just the thing that came to mind was the Ohio State University. I believe it's the Kirwan Institute, if I recall correctly. They have put out a whole series of publications. The premise of their work was the biological aspects of implicit bias. And I thought it was interesting. I've referred to it several times over the years. The one thing that they talk about, of course, is that and to your point, Senator Spearman, we need to make sure we're walking the walk, right? Or at least walking the talk. So, I've looked at this. I look at my own experience, in my own law firm. We've got 9 people there, 6 of whom are women, and about 60% are minority, whether it's Spaniard, Asian, Hispanic, mixed. So I think I can say that in my own personal experience, we've tried to look at qualifications instead of race. And so, as we look through these lenses and we try to establish what the appropriate protocols are, I completely agree that data should be driving everything. The question I have, though, is that we've spent decades trying to remove from the hiring equation the issue of race. And so many, if not most, employers don't inquire as to the race of the party that they're hiring or interviewing. So I'm wondering if, have we talked to particularly the resorts and the major manufacturing employers that, those that will fall in this, most of whom I think will probably be the resorts, to see if they even keep this data, if they, is this going to put a burden on them to have to go ask their employees how they identify? Because, we talked about this in that policing bill too, where officers that make a stop, they often haven't even seen the driver yet. So and when they get to the window and they're talking, they can't ask the question. Are we requiring the businesses to do the same thing? I'm concerned that we might be opening them up to legal liability if they even ask. How do we gather this data?
If I could make one comment there, Senator, and your observations are well-founded. Most large...
If you could state your name for the record, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I get used to butting in conversation and forgetting my government protocol. And Vice Chairwoman Canizero and members of the committee. Most large companies keep this information, and I think if you look at the questions in particular on this survey, they don't go way deep down into representation. It's more broader groups, similar like the top highest 20 paid people in your company. How many are men? How many are women? How many are people of color? And the intent is to give some indication whether representation is advancing to the highest levels of an organization. Corporations often say that 50% of their workforce are women, and that's exactly the truth. What they don't tell you is that 50% is director and below, and that there is a very slow path forward. I think, and it's why I earlier referenced the Human Rights Committee, they were brilliant in their approach of gathering information that rewarded companies who had forward-looking policies. And by rewarding them, they made companies want to be a part. That's why in this survey, we tried to have the data not be something that became remnants of affirmative action. It is more measuring highline vision on the part of Nevada governments and Nevada businesses. At least half the questions pertain to policies, whether it's policies over healthcare, policies over family leave, policies as it regards to childcare. And again, the intent is not in any way to punish. It's to reward and give us a baseline of what is best practice so we can move there. I would also commend you on your representation at the law firm. And I would think, as I've found in Nevada, we can be, like Ohio State, very powerful combatants in a good way. We all like to win. And if we're looking at companies that are doing it better than we are, sometimes it gives us the incentive to put in place similar policies and practices. So I know most companies, almost all of them, fill out the Human Rights Committee information because they're looking for their 100% score. So I don't think the information required in this survey goes much beyond that.
All right, I appreciate that. And from your perspective, I certainly trust what you're saying because you're in the boardroom, you've risen to the top of the food chain, and you're in a position to know the answer to that. I'm just, so that actually, I think, answered my next question, which was under Section 7. Have we given us enough time? If they are already gathering that information, then the answer is yes. They should be able to do this survey right away. My last question then is, once this is compiled, I don't see a report back to the businesses per se that are participating, but it does, is this, when it says make the report available on, I'm sorry, I'm in Section 9, make the report available on the internet website of the department. I'm wondering, is there going to be some kind of dissemination campaign where we get this information out to the public, or is this merely residing on a shelf if someone wanted to look it up?
I'm sure there would be a question.
I'll start and then I'll let Dan or Becky finish. So really, it's not something that we want to put on the shelf. What we want to do is use the data so that we can develop best practices for increasing diversity in businesses. I mean, it's simple. It's not a quota. It's not a requirement. We just want to know where we start. This is a baseline. We're starting right here. And in 5 years, we hope to be here. In 10 years, we hope to be here. And so that's what it is. And I'll toss now to Ms. Jones.
Madam Chair, Jan Jones-Blackhurst for the record. The senator's statement just made me wonder if, as we're compiling the data, if we chose to make public on the website the 10 highest performing companies or organizations, that was the posted information, and that other information could be upon request, but it was more for the use of government in measuring our movement forward. It's just a thought. As I said, we've been looking for ways to make this an incentive and something that rewards and doesn't punish. You made the point, and it's something I stress all the time. When you look at inclusive, whether it's organizations or corporations or governments, nobody wants to change the meritocracy. We want the best and the brightest. We just know that right now, representationally, we have some very bright people, but it's not always the most inclusive and representative of the best and brightest in all of our community.
And Chair Scheibel, if I may, I'd like to bring something to the committee's attention. If you look at Section 7, subsection 2, the way the bill is currently drafted, if a corporation that's participating has an internet website, the legislation makes them make the report that's been submitted to the department available on its website. At least that's my read of it. So in addition to having it on some state websites, right now, the way the legislation reads, corporations would also have to have the report as part of their website. It's for the committee to determine whether or not you want to make that a mandatory requirement on corporations. But to answer Senator Pickard's question, broad dissemination if you pass Section 7 is currently drafted.
Right, and thank you for that. I guess, Ms. Jones-Blackhurst, I really do appreciate your point as to meritocracy. And, as I've talked to others about these, particularly those in the larger operations that I was engaged with, that most of their hiring practices or promotion practices had to do with the experience in the organization. And so there was this natural internal bias, if you will, towards in-house experience as opposed to the a race conscious or a gender conscious criteria. And so a lot of this is pushing against inertia, where in my case, where I was pretty much forming the firm from scratch, I chose people based on strictly on their demeanor, their skill sets, and their focus in litigation. And so, or on the staff side, in their team effort. And so, for me, it was fairly easy because I didn't look at race, I didn't look at gender. In fact, until we got into this conversation, I didn't really realize how diverse my staff was. These were just my friends that we had developed. We put together a fantastic team. I think we're the best family law firm in the state, and not that I'm biased by that either, right? But at the end of the day, it was about the merits of the hiring, and it just happened to be what it is. And so, I recognize there's a balance. I recognize there's a need for data, but it's, I also think it's a balance with burdens on the businesses. So I appreciate your comments. I certainly support the idea of data collection. I'll be interested to see what the businesses have to say. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your indulgence.
Thank you. Chair Scheibel, let me just stop for just a minute. I don't want people to think that this is a quota. Diversity simply means that, yes, you are hiring the best, and their race, ethnicity, gender identity doesn't stand in the way. It doesn't stand in the way. And as I said to you, there were times in my military career where being Black was a problem and being a woman was a problem. And I was better than, almost anybody in the battalion when a military police company came open. In the brigade, when a military police battalion came open, I had more seniority, I had more experience. I was the best one, and everybody said that I was the best one. But I was told that I wouldn't get it because the commander didn't think that they would listen to a woman, and being black would complicate matters further. Said that. Those exact words said that. So everybody on the committee, please don't see this as a quota. What we're saying here is, just like you've done, Senator Pickard, you're bragging about the fact that you have, probably the most diverse staff. That's all it is. If you're doing it, this is an opportunity to brag about it. So it's not a quota system. It simply says if someone in your business, we don't even talk about hiring in this bill. If someone that you hire or you promote, or if they're the best one and they happen to be a woman, then give it to them. But don't go over the woman for the incompetent man because you don't want to see women rise to the top. But we're not even in that. We're not even in the hiring process. What we're doing is we're asking people to do a survey, talk to us, tell us what your diversity, the diversity in your company looks like. And there have been several studies in recent years that have shown that corporations that have a significant number of women, that have a significant amount of diversity, their bottom line is usually always better than those who don't. This is not a quota. This is not you look at the race and then the qualifications. No. This is a matter of saying, okay, this is the kind of diversity we have in our company. This is the kind we have in another company. And like I said before, Senator Pickard, you spent 5 minutes bragging about how diverse your law firm was. And, and I heard, you're proud of that, and you should be. You should be. And there are probably some corporations that are already very diverse and they're leading the way. They should have an opportunity also to brag. It's not punitive. Let's get a baseline so we know where we started.
I appreciate that. For the record, I wasn't bragging. I was just pointing out something that I didn't know until I looked at it, because that was not the focus. But in any event, I appreciate that. Thank you.
But bragging's okay. Bragging's okay. Bragging's okay. If you're in the right, bragging's okay. And I'll be quiet so we can move.
No, thank you. We appreciate your input, Senator Spearman. And it looks like Senator Hansen also has a question. Go ahead.
Thanks, actually. I got a ton of them, but we don't have enough time to go through the whole thing because number one, I think what Senator Spearman just said is something that's being overlooked. Look, businesses aren't out there to hire people. They're in the business of making money. And if the bottom line actually goes up, if you have an expansion of women, for example, in your workforce, all the other businesses will copy that simply because they're all competing for the same dollars. So the idea that we have to have quotas or certain diversities, you mentioned bypassing a more qualified woman to hire a less qualified man. Businesses that do that go out of business. So I would just say that this idea that we're talking about a workforce development and all these sorts of issues, they take care of themselves. It's called the marketplace. So got to get that out there. The idea too that this is not a bill to penalize, actually it will be in the long run. Let's face it. While we keep saying over and over, this is not affirmative action, this is not quotas, that's exactly what this will be in the long run. Because if a business answers this survey and they don't have a certain percentage of something or one group or the other in the subdivision of the subdivisions, then they're going to face possible discriminatory lawsuits. And ultimately that will be the purpose. And then the idea too that we're going to possibly throw people into prison because they supposedly commit perjury when they go to answer what is supposed to be a cooperative survey. I mean, none of this makes any sense. So I think also when you look at things like meritocracy, the whole concept of meritocracy, you pick the best person possible. And
Senator,
that's something to take care of itself.
Is there a question in there?
There is.
Okay.
If we already have, by admission, businesses doing this, and according to Senator Spearman's testimony, the businesses are doing this, are already financially in the best positions compared to those that are not, what's the point in this? Why are we forcing something that should be taking care of itself naturally through the best practices that all businesses seek to do?
Madam Chairwoman, if I could respond to the question, Jan Jones Blackhurst, for the record. It's interesting, Senator Hanson, one of the things that has changed in Fortune 500 companies today, in fact, most recently adopted by the CEO Roundtable, which is probably the most prestigious board of CEOs in America, whereas the old view used to be it just mattered how much money you made in return to your shareholders. Today, they recognize that that is a faulty proposition, that it's not just the responsibility of a corporation to make money for their shareholders. It's also a responsibility to give back to their communities and to give back to their workforce. Because by having that broader vision, they're higher performing, they're better community partners, and the reward, to your point, is that the metrics that have been accumulated that show that broader vision gives you a higher return on sales, higher EBITDA, higher performance across the board. I think what's interesting about the bill as proposed by Senator Spearman, similar to the Human Rights Committee, in 20 years, we have seen a revolution in the way the LGBTQ community is treated in America. And it's because corporations became collaboratively competitive on making sure that their policies were welcoming. And in doing so, we went from a whole part of the workforce who was largely invisible to a part of the workforce that now has completely equal rights, even the opportunity to marry in America. So sometimes a healthy competition on the part of corporations at looking at what best practice companies have achieved becomes not only a benefit to organizations, but a benefit to the broader community at large. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, this is Becky Harris for the record. I want to make 2 points and then clear up an inaccuracy. I'm going to pick on Senator Pickard. He unwittingly proved the value of this bill during the middle of this hearing as he was forced to go through his staff and look at how it's constituted and recognize that in his particular situation, he is already meeting the diversity objectives of this bill. And that's exactly the point of this bill. It's not about ratios and quotas and all those other things. It's about having businesses pause for a moment and look at how their hiring practices are effectuating leadership opportunities for diverse populations, which is exactly what Senator Pickard did in the middle of this hearing. In that sense, we've already had a measure of success. I want to clear up the inconsistency with regard to the perjury as part of the conceptual amendment that's being proposed that should have been provided to the committee. To the extent that it hasn't, I'll see that the chair gets it. All of the criminal penalties, including the penalties for perjury, are being amended out of the bill and going to be replaced with some administrative fines through the Department of Taxation for willful non-compliance or misrepresentation.
Madam Chair, if I could respond.
Is it another question?
Yeah, and a comment. You know, I grew up in the era when we were supposed to judge people by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin. We're actually going backwards here. We are eliminating meritocracy. The point Senator Pickard made was without anybody pointing those things out to them, the meritocracy of his employees are what made them rise to his employment. It had nothing to do with their race, gender, or whatever. And that's where I think we're going absolutely backwards. And I think it's almost frightening that we're going to start asking people once again on job applications what color they are, what sexual practices they may have. Those are types of things that are frankly something that we work very hard to get rid of so that people would not use those as criteria in hiring and firing people. So I don't know, I see Martin Luther King's dream that we're all going to be together someday and we'll judge each other, not by our skin color, but by our character, being gradually but surely washed away in this endless quest for quotas and diversity and forcing this on everyone. Just total violation of business liberty and just the concept of freedom in our country and a violation of that great speech. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, may I just respond? Because I don't
Please.
sure how survey get interpreted as quota. I don't know. I've been trying to find out if is there something in the dictionary that I missed? Is there something in the thesaurus that I missed? Let me say this again. Let me be clear. This bill doesn't mean someone is going into a corporation and saying, you must do this, you must do this, you must. It does not say that. Survey, survey. Say it in your mind. Survey, 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 survey. And the thesaurus doesn't say that is the same thing as quota. So let's be clear on that. If you think this is a bill about quota, then I would just invite you to look over it again and hear what I'm saying, what former Senator Harris is saying, what Ms. Jan Jones is saying. And I mean, you know, because of where she was before she was here, I mean, you know, she was at the very top, at the very top. And so, you know, we can opine about a number of things, but listen, do I need to say it much slower? I don't know.
Senator Spearman, you're a little bit being condescending, and I kind of resent it. I can read this.
I'm not being condescending. I want to say because
let me make this point very clear. While the bill may not be about quotas, that when this information, this data is gathered, and certain corporations do not meet certain numbers, then it will be about quotas. And that ultimately is what this is about, is determining and forcing all corporations in the state of Nevada to meet certain criteria, and the ones that do not will ultimately be penalized in one form or another over time based on this data. So call it quota, call it affirmative action, whatever it is, it's definitely not meritocracy and it's not market-based. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think you've made your position very clear, Senator Hansen. I also think that our presenters have done an excellent job of explaining what this bill is and what this bill is not, what this bill does and what it does not do. And what this bill is not and what it does not do is require companies to reach any kind of quota. It asks them to participate in a survey to help us understand the breadth, the depth of the diversity in our private sector, which is something that they need help with from us by passing this bill. And I appreciate that Senator Spearman has subjected herself once again to this barrage of questions that I think has been largely not relevant to the bill. And I'm going to ask that anybody else who has questions makes them very specifically related to the bill so that we can move on to discuss it. And if you're not going to support it, then you're not going to support it. But if you are going to support it, then let's get there. Senator Seltmyer.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. My question is, I'd actually like to see more information, and I was wondering if it's possible to have that discussion. In my neck of the woods in the north, it's more of an issue of trying to find employees that will actually show up on time. Then the second part of it is some places actually have certain tests they're required to pass, and a lot of people don't. Is there any discussion maybe of trying to get more information out of this to make it more useful? You know, would you guys be okay with the concept of amendment? I'd love to know from these larger corporations or corporations period, what their turnover rate is. How many vacancies do they generally have on an ongoing basis? You know, I think that helps with the information as a legislator, at least, to be able to try to make decisions about potentially policies across the board, no matter what they are, and trying to help figure out how to get people back to work, or maybe even the ability to create programs within this legislative body that says, you know, we have a tremendous number of vacancies here. Is it because they're not paying enough? Or is it because the educational field isn't necessarily directing individuals to that? And so that is a question I have. And the second question I would have is, curious, how many businesses will this new number, how many businesses are above that level? Because again, we don't have a gigantic number of employers once you get outside of the government realm. So in the private sector, what will this new threshold potentially, how many employers will this affect? Just out of curiosity.
What was the other thing?
So I am going to turn it over to the sponsor of the bill and the bill presenters to answer your questions. I'm still not sure that the first one is germane, but I'll leave it up to them.
Thank you, Madam Chair. But with all the experience that I have, I've not had the experience of being vice president in a major corporation. And so I'm going to toss it to Ms. Jan Jones, who has probably had more experience at that level than most of the people in the legislature. So, Ms. Jones, can you respond to that, please?
It would probably, doing some of the turnout, that they probably would have that kind of information available if the committee thought that could be a value. I'm not sure how it becomes a picture of what Nevada companies look like. I certainly would not be opposed to that. I'm sure they compile that information on a regular basis. I think we work very hard at looking at these questions, as I said, to not make them onerous, to try to give us a picture of how Nevada looks as a diverse and inclusive employer in the United States. That conversation is being visited by every major corporation. You know, we're grappling with the question of how do we do this? How do we do it in a productive way? How do we do it protecting meritocracy? How do we make sure that the best and the brightest in our communities are represented at all levels of our organizations? One of the things I found at Caesars in the last, starting in 2017, we made a commitment that by the year 2025, we would have 50-50 representation of women and women of color at all levels of the organization, both horizontally and vertically. And in order to do that, we first had to understand where we were. And where we were was a wake-up call for our entire senior management. Because as I said, almost 50% of our workforce were women. But when you started looking at representation as vice president, as senior vice president in C-suite, those numbers went from 50% to 25% to 16% to 3%. And it wasn't because there wasn't a wealth of talent. In many ways, it was an ignorance of knowledge. Sometimes you don't see something unless you're looking for it. So we tried to look at questions on this survey that would allow corporations to assess themselves without a penalty, to say, oh, we look really good here, but maybe we have some work to do here. And for those that are doing very well, to say, look at what a great job we're doing. And maybe we can share with you the policies and the procedures that we utilized to get to here. So it's...
I appreciate that, Ms. Jones. So in other words, this bill will allow companies to kind of look internally at their own policies and be able to evaluate how they might be able to improve. But just out of curiosity, you have way more knowledge than I ever will in the larger corporate realm. How many corporations do you think this will apply to in the state of Nevada? I mean, if you left it as a bill that only applied to, individual corporations that have more than 50,000 people, I think that's only one in the state of Nevada. So I was just curious if you had any idea how many employers this might be dealing with.
If you push it to 1,000 or more, it becomes a small group, because there aren't that many large employers in the state of Nevada. If it's 500, you have a much broader group. If, as I said, if there's a discomfort in the business community and we feel that a broader selection would be more representational, we might look at how we pattern it after the Human Rights Committee and make it an incentive for companies to respond, which would broaden the base and maybe give us richer data. I think having governments and NCHI as a requirement, as I said, I think it's appropriate because it's paid by taxpayer money, and I think their representation should look like the people paying their taxes. But if you made it more of an incentive based for corporations, you might get a broader representation and participation. But that's for the senator and the committee to consider. And again, I'm sorry, Jan Jones Blackhurst for the record.
Okay.
Thank you kindly for that answer, and thank you, Chair, for that. I do think that the concept of having more and more information is valuable. I appreciate the concept of the survey. I do think that knowing turnover and vacant positions could help individuals try to figure out what's best for their employment careers, and also have a business internally look at itself and go, gee, why are we our average stay here is only got people that are only staying around here 5-6 years. Maybe we need to be taking a look at that. But anyways, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Senator Cannizzaro.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel, and thank you, Senator Spearman, Senator Harris, and Ms. Jones-Blackshurst for being here today to present to us. It's always good to see you all here. And so I have just a couple questions in anticipation of what I think we may hear in some testimony, and obviously trying to be cognizant of what we are asking of some of our business folks. I would like to start with saying that I think this bill is a good idea that has a lot of merit to it, even from an informational standpoint, because it does allow us to answer questions about whether different aspects of ensuring that we don't have discrimination in the workplace are happening. And I mean, even to answer questions about, why is equal pay for equal work something that we have to address from a policy standpoint, necessarily begs the question of, well, are women making less? Are they in different positions? Is it merely because of their own job or career choices? And I think this is the kind of information that we are seeking in order to make those decisions, and obviously want to hold one another and the entities that are in our communities accountable, and our government agencies as well. So I definitely appreciate that. I would anticipate that there may be some pushback as to the additional burdens that this would place on businesses for having to not only fill out the survey, but have to track a lot of this information with their employees. And so I was wondering if anyone has sort of some thoughts on that, or what might be within this bill that would assuage some of those fears.
Jan Jones-Blackhurst for the record, and I don't know, can you hear me better? Great. Yeah. As I said, I think that having data becomes very important in having companies being aware of the work they need to do. It was interesting when this bill passed last session, both Clark County Commission, UNLV, and Washoe voted independently to fill out the data. So there was a huge positive response. I think that Senator Settlemyer makes a point. If we can look for a way, and I might propose that amendment, to make it voluntary for businesses, but look for ways we can incentivize their participation, that it may get us broader information, more data, because we wouldn't want to lose the data of a smaller law firm that's doing a wonderful job, and just limit it to maybe 20 companies that are the large employers. So, as I've said, HRC did find a way to do this with a high degree of success, and that may be something we want to look at. And I have to think about what those incentives could be. I think the more participation that we could achieve would be more useful at our really evaluating where we are as a state and as employers. I will say on equal work, though, and Jan Jones-Blackhurst for the record, Madam Vice Chairwoman, I've been given the same speech for 30 years. White women earn 82 cents on the dollar to their white male colleagues. African American women earn 78 cents. Latino women earn 58 cents. In over 30 years, it has never changed. Now, that can't all be a question of how they choose their employment opportunities. It's interesting, when we started the 50-50 by 2025 at Caesars, one of the first things we did was a pay equity analysis. And I'm really proud to say that it came out that in corporate employees, there was 99% no discernible pay inequity. And in employees more broadly, it was 98% no discernible. But we never would have known that if we hadn't looked. But we knew we couldn't make a statement about achieving 50-50 in representation at senior levels if we didn't first understand what we look like as employers in pay. So I think this information is not just useful to legislative bodies and governments. I think it's very useful for companies in assessing themselves. If their true desire is to be forward thinking and create those diverse and inclusive governments. And I would bring to the committee's attention one other thing. For decades, the representation of the major philharmonic orchestras were 90% men and 10% women until they went to blind auditions. And what they did is you auditioned behind a screen, and the women couldn't even wear heels, so there was no way to determine who was auditioning. And the representation today is 50-50 and very often 60-40, women to men. So unconscious bias, you can call it whatever you want. I don't think that anyone wakes up in the morning and thinks, boy, I would really like to discriminate today. But I think there are things that we can do that help companies be as high performing as they can, and to help the state be a leader in building diverse and equitable both companies and governments. Thank you.
No, and thank you. I definitely appreciate it. And it is encouraging to hear not only smaller entities here in the state, but also larger entities working towards more diversity and inclusion and seeing good outcomes as a result of that. So thank you. Thank you, Tricia.
All right, thank you. And with that, we will turn to testimony in support of SB 267.
I'm so sorry. Apologize about that, Chair Tribal. Thank you very much. To testify in support on Senate Bill 267, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in support on Senate Bill 267, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits 044, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin. Once again, caller with the last three digits 044, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, esteemed Chair and Committee. My name is Dr. Tiffany Tyler Garner, TIFFANY, TYLER-GARNER, and I'm calling on behalf of the Children's Advocacy Alliance and from a few vantage points. One, on behalf of the Children's Advocacy Alliance, a statewide, nonpartisan child policy advocacy organization where our whole focus is empowering leaders like you to make informed decisions about the issues impacting children and families. Just want to affirm the value of a survey of this nature, particularly as we attempt to understand and contextualize the economic well-being of children, having a sense of the wage earners in their households, including some of the data, particularly the data around leave and the ability to leverage other resources as a part of improving conditions for children would be incredibly helpful. I can also speak to you from a few previous past apps, including Heading Dieter, where Research and Analysis Bureau was housed, and can tell you from that vantage point, as well as a published researcher, the ability to have surveys that draw directly from our population go a long way in helping us contextualize the conditions that our Nevada families face in crafting either policy or even resource allocation. A number of the places that we pull data from are oftentimes data analysis, where there's some national survey that has occurred and you're hoping they included a portion of Nevadans in the sample. And so your ability to extrapolate like what is happening with children and families can be encumbered by that. This particular survey, as well as other policies that are requesting that we capture more data, are helpful in that it helps us further refine our understanding of the plight that families face. Even if we consider the recent impacts of the pandemic, where reports indicate
sorry,
that women have left
2 minutes.
workforce
You could just
4
wrap
times
up
the
for us,
rate.
please. Thank you.
Yes. So I ask for your consideration and thank you for any consideration you may give today. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And as a reminder, we are currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 267. If you've recently joined us or missed a previous prompt, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, we're currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 267. If you'd like to provide support testimony at this time, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, at this time, there are no more callers to give support testimony on SB 267.
Thank you so much. We will now move to opposition testimony on SB 267.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Senate Bill 267, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to provide opposition testimony on Senate Bill 267, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits 139, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and committee members. Misty Grimmer, Grimmer, with the Ferraro Group, representing the Nevada Resort Association. Chair Scheibel and Senator Spearman, we have not had a chance yet to work through the amendment, so we will still need to review that and get back to you, Senator Spearman. We are very supportive of the goal to assess how companies are doing with respect to establishing diversity and equity in all ranks of their workforce. Ms. Jones-Blackhurst has shared how the gaming industry has been at the forefront on this issue. We are concerned, though, that the requirements of this bill put an unnecessary duplication on our members due to the extent and detail of the reporting requirements. Society and policymakers are demanding what is being addressed in this bill, and our members have gotten that message and have been continually, voluntarily working towards establishing a diverse workforce from top to bottom and putting in place recruiting and hiring practices designed to eliminate the opportunity for discriminatory hiring. We have concerns, though, with the public posting of some of this data, both with respect to proprietary activities of our companies, as well as the inadvertent disclosure of information that could lead curious persons to be able to identify exactly who the person being referred to is, even if the data doesn't directly disclose this. In answer to some of the questions, much of the demographic information SB 267 is asking for is already collected in the EEO-1 reports that each large company files with the EEOC. And the data for those reports is done via in-house surveys similar to what is being asked for in this bill. Perhaps a system to share that data with the state could be designed, eliminating the duplication. However, not all of that data is publicly available. We would like to continue to work.
I need you to wrap up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We will continue to work with the Senator on the details of the bill.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last 3 digits 746, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Greetings, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Natalie Buckle, that's Buckel. I serve as the Vice Chair of the Legislative Committee for the Henderson Chamber, which represents more than 1,800 businesses throughout Southern Nevada. I appreciate the sponsor for bringing this bill forward. Our chamber strongly supports workplace diversity and inclusion efforts that encourage equality in the workforce. In fact, our members know well that business diversity and inclusion efforts improve their businesses and make them more attractive to prospective employees, while also addressing serious concerns regarding underemployed and underrepresented communities. We have a technical concern on the bill in terms of the potential to violate the privacy of some employees who may choose not to participate, especially those in which perhaps their race or gender identity is not readily apparent if not given. I believe simply for that reason, it places us in opposition. Thank you for the opportunity to share our concerns.
Thank you, caller. As a reminder, we are currently on opposition testimony for Senate Bill 267. If you recently joined us and would like to provide opposition testimony at this time, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 137. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon. This is Brandy Hairston, and I'm calling in opposition of SB 267 because I would like to see some amendments to the bill. The bill leaves out United States descendants of chattel slavery. There are many different women of color in Nevada, and for that reason, it's best to separate those women or men into different categories. To accurately identify which category of people are getting hired, the collection of data needs to be more specific. Specificity is key. Separating the different groups of women of color between Somalian, Nigerian, United States descendant of chattel slavery, Jamaican, Latino, Asian, etc., will present a clear picture of desired employment data. We also need U.S. descendant of chattel slavery added to underrepresented communities. Furthermore, Black men are not mentioned in SB 267. Black men are part of the Black community with the highest unemployment rate in Nevada, according to prosperitynow.org. We need Black men included in this bill to collect their employment data as well. There are amendments that will make the bill more viable. The requested amendments are: specify United States descendants of chattel slavery as a category, include Black men in the survey and data collection, add United States descendants of chattel slavery as one of the underrepresented communities. Words like people of color, women of color, BIPOC are problematic because it doesn't tell which people of color you're referring to. This bill is necessary, and if data is collected appropriately, it could help pinpoint discrimination in the workplace. The language, unfortunately, is extremely vague. The bill in its current form is not useful in determining discrimination for Black descendants of slaves. I can't explain enough how vital it is to disaggregate the collection of data and specify the identity of people who describe themselves as U.S. descendants of chattel slavery. Without these amendments, this bill will not help. The bill will not help its most unemployed and vulnerable population here in Nevada. We urge Nevada to no longer lump descendants of U.S. slavery together with all other minority groups. This bill has the potential to be so much more transparent and beneficial if these amendments are made on behalf of the Black community. For example, the United States descendants of slaves are no longer the majority at historically Black colleges, HBCUs. What we're finding is, because we're lumped together under people of color, BIPOC, minority.
Please wrap up.
Sure. What we're finding is other minority groups are being led into institutions and being hired, and the people that these institutions were actually built for, they're the ones that are being locked out. So thank you for this bill, and we ask that these amendments be in there so we can be in favor of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And with that, Chair Scheibel, there are no more callers to provide opposition testimony at this time.
Thank you. We will go to testimony in the neutral position.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral standing on Senate Bill 267, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to provide neutral testimony on Senate Bill 267, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, at this time, there are no callers to give neutral testimony.
All right, thank you so much. At this point in time, I will close the hearing on SB 267, and I will open the hearing on SB 365. Senator Orenshaw, whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Chair Scheibel, members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. For the record, my name is James Orenshaw. I represent State Senate District 21. That's parts of Henderson and unincorporated Clark County. During the last interim, I had the distinct honor to chair the Interim Committee on Child Welfare and Juvenile Justice. We were able to have a total of 6 meetings Before the pandemic hit, we were able to have 2 in-person meetings at the Grant Sawyer State Office Building with live streams up here to Carson City. After the pandemic hit, we were able to have 4 virtual meetings. And I was very, very lucky to be assisted by just tremendous staff, Mr. Guinan, your committee policy analyst chair, Julianne King, Eileen O'Grady from the legal division, and Carly O'Krent. Just tremendous, tremendous help. And we were able to come up with a lot of recommendations. Almost all of our recommendations, I believe, had unanimous bipartisan support. And the 3 bills that you have agendized today are part of those recommendations. Chair, I want to be brief, but I do want to just give a brief introduction to Senate Bill 365. And I'd like to actually, I do have Holly Wellborn from the ACLU of Nevada here with me as well to help me present the bill. And with your permission, Chair, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Wellborn, and then I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel, and thank you to Senator Orenshaw for inviting us to present on this bill. This is an issue that we at the ACLU of Nevada have been working on for several years. And for the record, my name is Holly Wellborn, Policy Director for the ACLU of Nevada. My literal first day, this is one of the first issues that we wanted to tackle, specifically looking at the way that we house youth who have entered the adult criminal justice system. So for the sake of time, most of our committee members here are no stranger to this idea of how brain science dictates our approach to juvenile justice. And the revelation and understanding that juveniles are both scientifically and constitutionally different than adults, and the laws and our approach to those juveniles should be quite different. And this issue of housing, we're looking at an era where both the Supreme Court, both this body have said that young people are entitled to parole. We have abolished life without parole sentences in this country and in this state. And so in this era without life parole sentences, those individuals will be given an opportunity for a parole hearing. And the case law states that the age at the time of the offense weighs heavily in favor of parole for most youth. So that means most youth will grow into adulthood in the prison sentence if they have during their prison sentence. If they have a lengthy sentence, then they will eventually be released. And so if we fail to meet an adolescent's age-specific developmental needs, we fail to prepare them for life outside of prison. In Nevada, when a child is transferred to the adult justice system, pre-trial, they're sent to an adult jail. So in Clark County, for example, they do have a youth pod that is just for young people that is separate from the general adult population for purposes of the Prison Rape Elimination Act, which requires sight and sound separation between young people and adults. And then here in Washoe County, it's a lot more complex and a lot more troubling because those young people would have to be sent to the Washoe County jail off of Parr Boulevard, and they would be put in a medical isolation unit without any programming while they're waiting a long time to go to trial and eventually enter the Nevada Department of Corrections. On Nellis, there is a report published by the ACLU of Nevada. We were welcomed into nearly every juvenile facility in the state and also the Lovelock Correctional Center. We very much view this bill, this program, this package of bills that you will review today as a partnership with the Nevada Department of Corrections, because if anything is clear between all stakeholders, adult institutions are not the appropriate placement for young people. And that has been where the stakeholders have wanted, the direction we've wanted to go for over a decade, for several decades. So what this bill does is it's the next step in a series of different policy changes that we have embarked upon to start looking at the best way to move youth out of the Nevada Department of Corrections and into a facility for young people. So again, on Nellis, you can find that report. You can also find some examples from Washington and Oregon where youth have been fully integrated. I think there's about 16 states now that never, even if they have a direct file statute that transfers automatically to adult court or certification statutes, those youth never leave the youth system and those kids are completely integrated. But Nevada is not ready for that step. So that's why this bill, establishing a pilot program, is that next necessary step. I do want to pause for a moment to also thank Patrick Guinan for his help and assistance in helping not only the legislators on the Interim Committee on Child Welfare and Juvenile Justice to understand the best package and the best way to sort of separate these different concepts in a package of bills that will keep moving the ball forward on this issue without shocking the system and actually having a negative impact on youth. And so we're incredibly grateful to him and appreciate everything he did to move this forward. So with that, I will briefly talk about the bill language. It's quite straightforward. In section 1 of the bill, you will see on lines 2 and 3 that we're talking about an agreement between the Department of Corrections and the Division of Child and Family Services. It's deliberate rather than imposing on the county the requirement to retain youth in this particular pilot program. It's a little bit easier to move from state institution to state institution. The bill further requires that they establish a program, both develop and implement this pilot program for young people under the age of 18. So those kids who have been transferred from the juvenile court, they've committed some criminal act, they've either been certified or direct filed, and who are now actually serving a sentence really at the Lovelock Correctional Center. Most of those convicted young people, they live in a youth pod at Lovelock Correctional Center. So this pilot program would be, in the conversations that we've had behind the scenes, this pilot program would be limited to about 8 to 10 kids that could move into a facility that during this interim period that will work together to decide what the appropriate facility would be and what the best sort of transition is and the best kids who are suitable for that program. And then the pilot program has to commence not later than January 1st of 2022. Section 2 says that not later than January 1st, 2023, the Department of Corrections and the division need to submit a report on the status of that pilot program, which will help to inform future legislation and help us to continue moving this program forward. And finally, Section 3 is, magical technical language that I think Senator Orenshaw or perhaps Mr. Anthony can explain better than I do, but it provides for hearings and exemptions. So with that, that is the very simple presentation on the bill, and I'm here for any questions you might have.
Fantastic, thank you. Senator Orenshaw, did you want to go through that portion of the bill or go to questions now?
Chair Scheibel, I'm happy to answer any questions. I do believe we have some representatives from the Division of Child and Family Services on the Zoom, and I believe they're here in neutral, but they may be able to help answer some technical questions as well.
Fantastic. Then we will go first to Senator Pickard.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. I always get nervous when I come up on the same side as ACLU on things. No, I'm kidding. We actually agree on an awful lot. I have been aware of this. I have been tangentially part of these discussions with some in the juvenile justice community for some time. I'm looking at the fiscal note though. Department of Corrections says 0, and Health and Human Services says they're contracting a vendor for $40,000. I can't imagine this whole pilot program is only going to cost $40,000. So I wonder if you can explain a little bit what that vendor's role in this is, what kind of changes are going to be required in the short term to do the pilot program. Can you kind of describe the pilot program itself, at least how it's been framed and what's been put out to, or what will be put out for an RFP, so that we can better understand what it is that we're actually trying to accomplish?
And Chair, for the record, James Orenshaw, Senate District 21, to you and through you to Senator Pickard. Certainly, I think that a lot of those specific answers may have to come from the agency as to the implementation if this bill passes. However, I do believe that a lot can be done through memorandums of understanding. That has been done, I believe, in Oregon and Washington State in terms of trying to keep those children out of the adult facilities, because certainly even where there is the sight and sound separation mandated by the Prison Rape Elimination Act, I believe the outcomes can be much better if children are in facilities for children, not in.
Sure, and I appreciate that, and I want them to respond. But let's not forget, we're talking about a population that has committed some really serious crimes. So these aren't just kids that have stolen something at the convenience store. These are people that were certified as adults because of some really bad stuff. So let's not sugarcoat who we're dealing with here. But on the flip side, they're still kids. We need to treat them as we do all children in the juvenile system towards rehabilitation if at all possible. And that's, I think, an important distinction to make. But I would like to hear what the vendor is going to be doing. Is the $40,000 going to cover all the costs of the pilot program, or is that just the kickoff start and we're going to have to come back somewhere, whether it's IFC or in another session, to fund the pilot program?
I am going to allow the sponsors to answer the question, but I'm a little bit confused about the fiscal note that you're looking at, Senator Pickard.
We're on SB 356. It says executive agency fiscal note contracted from HHS.
Unless I misspoke, I think we're on SB 365.
Oh, my error. I'm sorry. I thought we were on the issues relating to the housing of youthful offenders.
I think they both relate to housing of youthful offenders.
Okay, my error. So I'll wait. Let me just push the pause button and we'll come back to that when we get to the right bill. I apologize.
No problem.
Oh, no, thank you very much, Chair. And just to briefly respond, I think perhaps that if the agencies want to respond, they can. But certainly while these children who are housed at the boys at the Lovelock Correctional Center certainly have committed serious offenses, I think it's important to remember that many of these children have themselves been the victims of abuse and neglect. Many have had untreated mental health issues and substance abuse issues that a lot of times never got any treatment. Not to excuse what happened that got them there, but there is certainly a lot more to what happened to get those children up to the Lovelock Correctional Center.
Completely agree.
All right. Are there any other questions on SB 365? I'm not seeing any, so we will go to testimony in support.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. To testify in support on Senate Bill 365, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to give support testimony on Senate Bill 365, please press *9 now to take your place in queue. Caller with the last three digits, 611, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. This is John Piro, John-P-I-R-O, on behalf of the Clark County Public Defender's Office and the Washoe County Public Defender's Office, testifying in support of this bill, and like to thank Senator Orenshaw and Ms. Wellborn from the ACLU for bringing it forward. Thank you.
Mr. Kyle, is there anybody else in the queue to give support testimony on SB 365?
Chair, we're having just a brief technical difficulty. If you grant us just one moment, we'll be right back in with the testimony.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Apologies for that, Chair Scheibel. We are currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 365. If you'd like to provide support testimony at this time, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 377, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Deshaun Jackson, DASHUNJACKSON. I serve as the Director of Children's Safety and Welfare Policy with the Children's Advocacy Alliance. And we stand in support of Senate Bill 365. We believe that this bill is essential when it comes to housing youth where they should be appropriately housed. We believe that youth are youth and therefore should be treated as such. Thank you so much, Senator Scheibel and community members.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last three digits, 147, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the Senate Judiciary. This is Bridget Duffy, BRIGID, DUFFY, Chief of the Juvenile Division for the Clark County District Attorney's Office, and I am calling in to put my support on the record for SB 365 from the Clark County District Attorney's Office. We appreciate the communication that I've had with the ACLU and discussing how this we can make this pilot work, and I'm excited to see our future in the state of Nevada so that we can move forward some more innovative ideas of having and housing our youthful offenders. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. As a reminder, we are currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 365. Apologies. Support testimony currently for Senate Bill 365. If you'd like to provide support testimony at this time, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 007, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the committee. This is Lisa Rasmussen, LISARASMUSSEN. I'm calling on behalf of NACJ. NACJ supports this bill. We'd like to thank ACLU for all of their efforts in bringing this bill forward. As we know from a lot of prior legislation and efforts that we've had in various sessions, youth are different. And this bill, this pilot program, treats them as the different human beings and souls that they are. So NACJ supports it and encourages all of you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And as a reminder, we are currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 365. If you've recently joined us or missed previous prompts, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, at this time, there are no more callers to give support testimony.
All right, thank you. We will move then to testimony in opposition to SB 365.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. To testify in opposition on Senate Bill 365, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to provide opposition testimony on SB 365, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, at this time, there are no callers to give opposition testimony on SB 365.
Thank you so much. We will move to neutral testimony on SB 365.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral standing on Senate Bill 365, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in neutral on Senate Bill 365, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, at this time, there are no callers.
All right, thank you so much for your help. We will close the hearing on SB 365. We have 2 more bills to hear today, but we're moving along at a nice clip, so I'm hopeful that we will get through them in time for people to make it nearly on time to their next committees and obligations. Although, as always, I understand if committee members do have to come and go from Senate Judiciary to meet their other obligations, and I trust that you will all catch up on anything that you missed before any work sessions, should we have them. All of that being said, we will continue in reverse numerical order and go to open the hearing on SB 357. Senator Orenshaw.
Thank you very much, Chair Scheibel. For the record, James Orenshaw. I represent State Senate District 21. Senate Bill 357 is one of the three bills agendized today that came out of the Interim Committee on Child Welfare and Juvenile Justice. Thank you for hearing Senate Bill 357. As we've already discussed this afternoon, male juveniles, boys who are tried and convicted as adults in Nevada, are currently sent to the Lovelock Correctional Center, where they are housed separately from the general population of adults with sight and sound separation pursuant to the Federal Prison Rape Elimination Act. Nevada, from what we learned during the interim committee, has quite a challenge in terms of housing female juveniles who have been tried and convicted as adults. So for the time being, this bill applies specifically to those boys at the Lovelock Correctional Center. One of our responsibilities under the provisions of Assembly Bill 449 of the 2017 session at the Interim Committee on Child Welfare and Juvenile Justice was to study the costs associated with housing and caring for youthful offenders in Nevada, which doesn't sound like it should be a difficult task. However, as we learned early on in our discussions with the staff at the Lovelock Correctional Center, and I definitely want to thank all the staff at Lovelock and at NDOC for their incredible generosity and willingness to work on the questions we had while dealing with the unprecedented situation of the pandemic and Nevada's budget crisis. Does not separate its general budget at Lovelock as to what is spent on those juveniles who are housed there as opposed to the other inmates. And that was a difficulty we had during the interim in terms of trying to find that information. I would argue that the legislature, the Interim Committee on Child Welfare and Juvenile Justice, needs to know how much is being spent as a state on housing this population of children at the adult facility. And in terms of making future decisions, this information is very, very important. The bill before you sets forth a list of expenses that we are asking the Nevada Department of Corrections to track related to the housing of youthful offenders. Those expenses are as follows: education, communication and interaction with family members and others, healthcare, mental health services, recreational programming, and any other costs that the director of the Nevada Department of Corrections determines are related to the special needs of housing youthful offenders at the Lovelock Correctional Center. Chair Scheibel, with your permission, I believe that Ms. Wellborn would like to briefly speak to this bill, and then I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. Holly Wellborn, Policy Director for the ACLU of Nevada, and thank you to Senator Orenshaw. And actually, I think Senator Orenshaw laid that out perfectly. I'm here to answer any technical questions and just want to state that in the prior hearing on Senate Bill 365, we had discussed a potential pilot program to house a certain number of youth who are currently at the Lovelock Correctional Center in a juvenile institution. And this bill, and from our perspective, complements that and will help shape any cost sharing agreements that might need to occur in the future. So we very much see this as a complementary bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we will move to questions on SB 357. I see we already have one from Senator Settlemyer.
Thank you, Chair. I was just curious, does this only apply to that facility? I mean, you'll have to forgive me for not knowing the difference. How does this then not necessarily apply to China Springs, Rite of Passage, or other youth detentional facilities? If you could just provide the distinction, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair. James Orenshaw, State Senate District 21, through you to Senator Settlemyer. This bill applies to the children who have been transferred over to the adult criminal justice system and sentenced as adults who are under 18. Currently, boys are housed at the Lovelock Correctional Center, again with sight and sound separation under the Federal Prison Rape Elimination Act. As to the best of my knowledge, there are currently no female juveniles that I'm aware of at the Florence McClure Correctional Center down in Clark County. However, in the past, I believe that there has been at least one, although that's been a while. The information we got during the interim was that currently the very small number of female juveniles who had been transferred to the adult system and sentenced as adults, Nevada Department of Corrections has housed out of state.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Chair.
Absolutely. Any other questions from members of the committee on SB 357? All right, not seeing any questions, we'll move to testimony in support of SB 357.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. To testify in support on Senate Bill 357, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in support on Senate Bill 357, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 611. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. This is John Pirro from the Clark County Public Defender's Office, testifying on behalf of the Clark County Public Defender's Office and the Washoe County Public Defender's Office in support of this bill. We think that getting data is going to allow us to make better decisions, so we wholeheartedly support this bill and thank Senator Orenshaw and Ms. Wellborn from the ACLU for bringing it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last 3 digits, 377. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Deshaun Jackson, DASHUNJACKSON. I serve as the Director of Children's Safety and Welfare Policy with the Children's Advocacy Alliance, and we stand in support of Senate Bill 376. We thank Senator Scheibel and Senator Orenshaw.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last 3 digits, 007. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel, Senator Orenshaw, Lisa Rasmussen, LISA-RASMUSSEN, testifying on behalf of NACJ this afternoon. NACJ supports this bill, and we'd like to thank Senator Orenshaw and ACLU for bringing it forward, and I'd echo the comments of the others. I know you're short on time. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And with that, Chair Scheibel, there are no more callers to give support testimony.
All right, then we will move on to testimony in opposition on SB 357.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Senate Bill 357, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in opposition on SB 357, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, there are no callers to give opposition testimony at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Kyle. We will go then to testimony in the neutral position on SB 357.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral standing on Senate Bill 357, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in neutral on Senate Bill 357, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, at this time, there are no callers to give neutral testimony.
All right, thank you so much for your help. We will now close the hearing on SB 357, and we will open the hearing on SB 356. Senator Orenshaw.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel. I'm still James Orenshaw, still very fortunate to represent State Senate District 21. Thank you for hearing all 3 bills that came out of the interim committee. Our last bill is Senate Bill 356, Study of Youthful Offender Housing. First, I'd like to explain to the committee what we mean by youthful offenders. The intent here is that young people between the ages of 18 and 25 who've been tried as adults, currently the young boys who are serving their sentences at the Lovelock Correctional Center that we've mentioned earlier, which is medium security correctional facility designed for adults, but there is a youth pod, as was explained earlier, with sight and sound separation for these children. A small number of these youthful offenders arrive at Lovelock before their 18th birthday and are segregated from the adult population. The interim committee, this bill, the issue that we are trying to solve with this bill is that many of these children whose sentences will go beyond their 18th birthday are looking then at a transfer to one of the other Nevada Department of Correction facilities. The goal here with this legislation is to look at the feasibility of a youthful offenders program where young adults, 18 to 25, who are still serving their sentences would have the opportunity at a model based more on the juvenile system, more in terms of a treatment, whether it's for drug addiction, mental health, and in terms of trying to accomplish better outcomes when they return to society as young adults, in terms of trying to help them land on their feet as productive adults. And we're hoping that if this is feasible to establish a youthful offenders program like this, those children who are now becoming young adults in the correctional system will have more successful outcomes than currently in terms of transferring over to general population. Chair, I know the hour's late, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I do believe Ms. Wellborn has a few comments, but other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions about the study.
Thank you so much. And please go ahead, Ms. Wellborn. We're making good time.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel, and thank you, Senator Orenshaw. For the sake of time, I will direct the committee to Holly Wellborn, Policy Director for the ACLU of Nevada. For the sake of time, I will direct the committee to take a look at the exhibit that is a report from the National Conference of State Legislatures. It provides a lot of background about how young people in this age range, the 18 to 25-year-olds or 18 to 24-year-olds, how they need a different sort of intervention, different system in place to address their specific needs, because they're between those ages where they're not quite mature adults, but they're not quite adolescents. And so this would enable the Juvenile Justice and Oversight Commission to develop and meet the needs of that specific population. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on to questions. We have one from Senator Pickard. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now comes the question on what this thing looks like. I did look at the $2.3 million fiscal note from HHS on 365. That's what I kind of expected to see on the pilot program piece, but now that we've heard all three bills, I kind of understand this is really one program. Those were just three different pieces of it. So can you explain to me what this pilot program looks like? Who's doing it? Why are we hiring outside vendors? I think I know the answer to that, but I want to get it on the record. And then it looks like HHS or Child and Family Services certainly has a pretty clear idea of what they're going to be expected to do, given it looks like they've calculated this to the dollar, what they think this is going to spend. So can you describe what we're talking about and why it's going to cost $2.5 million and include a vendor?
And Chair, with your permission, if I could defer to Administrator Armstrong or anyone else from the state who might care to.
Yes, that is fine. And just for the record, I want the minutes to reflect that these bills do work in unison with each other. And so the fiscal note that Senator Pickard just referenced is actually on one of the fiscal notes is on SB 365. There's also one on SB 356. So it makes complete sense to discuss the bills together. I just want to make sure that when we go back and review the record, we note that that is what happened and that we didn't conflate the two, but that we're talking about both of them at the same time. Now, go ahead, if that's Mr. Armstrong down there with his mask on.
It is. This is Ross Armstrong, the administrator for the Division of Child and Family Services. Thank you, Chair, and to answer the question. So for the SB 356, the study, we it is not uncommon for the legislature to have bills that require an executive branch agency to do a study that we do not have the internal capacity or expertise to do ourselves. And so the amount estimated for what would be the contractor to do that study is based on prior studies of similar complexity. Last interim, we did a study on the federal extended foster care program and also a study on commercially sexually exploited children. And so this cost is in alignment with those. That is, a contract to perform, to deliver the study in the time frame that is required in order to give the interim committee enough time to draft legislation. So that is the cost based on that particular bill. In terms of the fiscal note for the actual pilot program with the Department of Corrections, and I will note that we spoke with the Department of Corrections on the study part and said we would be happy to take the lead in acquiring the contractor and helping facilitate that particular study so that there weren't like two competing studies from different departments. On the pilot program fiscal note, that is the cost for 8 beds to be operated at Summit View Youth Center, which is our only physically secure facility, our highest security facility. And so that is what the cost of 8 beds looks like. We can either do 8 or 16 based on the PREA ratios. 8 seem to be the best pilot number to work off of. There are a number of other bills that affect the certification process and competency. So we basically had that particular fiscal note written in terms of what does 8 beds look like at the Summit View Youth Center. So that is what the fiscal note on 365 looks like, is for the 8 beds that would be used for that pilot program and the staff to provide the services to those children.
Thank you for that. And to Senator Orenshaw's point, this is just the boys that are at Lovelock, or at least a subset of those. We're not looking at any of the young women. Is that correct?
This is Russ Armstrong, and that is correct. In talking with the Department of Corrections, we don't have a physically secure facility that has services for girls, and so we would not be able to include necessarily girls in this pilot program. I mean, as we go forward, there may be some other factors. If there's reduced girl demand because of some of the changes coming in the human trafficking world, and then there's space at Caliente, and there's an appropriate young woman to be housed there, that's a potential possibility, I guess. But the fiscal note itself is just focused on housing up to 8 boys at the Summit View Youth Center.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Scheibel.
Yes, any other questions on SB 356 or catch-all questions for the 3 bills we've heard regarding youthful offenders? Not seeing any, we will take testimony now in support of SB 356.
Thank you, Chair Scheibel. To testify in support on Senate Bill 356, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in support on Senate Bill 356, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 377, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon. Again, my name is Deshaun Jackson, DAFHUN, JACKSON. Serve as the Director of Children's Safety and Welfare Policy with the Children's Advocacy Alliance. We stand in support of Senate Bill 356. We believe this study is essential to understanding more about how we can house youthful offenders. Thank you so much, Senator Orenshaw and Senator Scheibel.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last 3 digits, 007. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Lisa Rasmussen, LISARASMUSSEN. I'm testifying again in support of this bill on behalf of NACJ. NACJ believes that this pilot program is appropriate and that it's necessary to address certain needs that are unique to the youth population. We'd like to thank Senator Orenshaw for bringing this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Caller with the last three digits, 611. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. This is John Pirro from the Clark County Public Defender's Office. And we'd like to thank Ms. Wellborn and Senator Orenshaw for bringing this package of bills together to help do better for our juveniles. We are in full support, as are the Washoe County Public Defender's Office. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. And as a brief reminder, we're currently on support testimony for Senate Bill 356. If you'd like to provide support testimony at this time, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, at this time, there are no more callers to give support testimony.
Okay, thank you. We will move then to testimony in opposition to SB 356.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Senate Bill 356, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to testify in opposition on SB 356, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, at this time, there are no callers to give opposition testimony.
Thank you. We will move to testimony in the neutral position on SB 356, please.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Senate Bill 356, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, to provide neutral testimony on Senate Bill 356, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 241, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Scheibel and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. My name is Alex Ortiz, ALEX-ORTIZ, representing Clark County. Clark County is neutral on SB 356 as written. Even though this is a policy committee, it is our only opportunity to mention the potential fiscal impact of Clark County. As the Bill Digest states, during the 2019 legislative session, the legislature enacted legislation requiring the Interim Legislative Committee on Child Welfare and Juvenile Justice to conduct a study during the 2019-2020 interim concerning juvenile detention in the state. The representative from our Clark County Department of Juvenile Justice Services testified during public comment at one of those meetings about prospective costs to Clark County if the Nevada Department of Corrections housed their juvenile offenders in our local juvenile detention center. The juvenile offenders currently held in NDOC facilities are transferred and held in our juvenile detention center. The cost to redesign existing space, build new space, operate and maintain this redesigned and new space, and hire more staff to house these juveniles and adults in our facilities will be in the tens of millions of dollars per year. Some of these costs associated with those would be, as an example, our juvenile detention centers are not built to detain adults. We would need to retrofit and build a new facility to accommodate the increased number of juveniles and adults. Many of the youth arrested are first-time offenders, so therefore diversion programs available to youth are not the same for adults, and supervision would be needed for most adults. A number of adults, those that would be 18 to 24 years of age, would be placed in some form of supervision, which would increase our probation caseloads and costs. Any potential savings in cost to NDOC, as contemplated in this study, will be an unfunded mandate to Clark County. We look forward to participating and working with NDOC and DCFS during the interim on this study, so all our needs and fiscal concerns are considered and addressed. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, caller. And with that, Chair Scheibel, there are no more callers to give neutral testimony at this time.
All right, thank you so much. We will close the hearing on SB 356. That takes us to the last item on our agenda, public comment. Is there anybody here to give public comment?
Thank you, Chair. We're currently on public comment. If you'd like to provide public comment at this time, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Once again, if you'd like to provide public comment this afternoon, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, the phone lines are open and working. However, there are no callers to give public comment at this time.
All right, thank you so much. That concludes our meeting for today. Good job, everybody, getting us out of here just 14 minutes past our scheduled end time. I appreciate your help and do encourage you to follow up offline if there are still questions you have or thoughts you want to express, and you're welcome to also send those to our committee email address and they'll be added to the official record. We will be doing this again tomorrow at the same time, same place, 1 p.m. Until then, we are adjourned.